Governor Brown declares a water crisis, ordering a 25% cutback in usage as the Sierra snowpack is almost non-existent. San Diego lifts the cap on taxicab permits for the first time in 30 years. What's the impact on drivers and taxi companies? And hope always springs eternal come opening day, but the Padres this year might actually contend as owners sign several stars in an effort to lure more fans to Petco Park. I'm Mark Sauer, and the KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer. And joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today are Speak City Heights reporter Megan Burks of KPBS News. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Mark.
And Tony Perry, San Diego bureau chief for the Los Angeles Times. Good to see you, Tony.
Good to be here.
And our old friend, sportscaster Jay Paris of Mighty 1090 Radio. Hi, Jay.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you back. Well, Governor Jerry Brown this week walked onto a Sierra meadow to make a point. There was supposed to be 5 or 6 feet of snow this time of year, but that meadow was bare. The snowpack upon which we rely for much of our fresh water is just 5% of normal. Tony, this stark fact got the governor to finally act here. What did he do? What's he ordering now?
Well, he's ordered a mandatory 25% cut in urban and suburban usage, mostly homes. Didn't touch agriculture. That's a whole other issue. But he said
we'll get into that in a second.
The era of limits, which is an old-time Jerry Brown phrase from his first term years ago, decades ago, is here with a vengeance. And so, while we've been hearing about this drought as it hit rural areas, and we've all had lots of stories about that, now it's hitting home in urban and suburban. And say goodbye to your lawn. Also, maybe the grass in the cemetery and your golf course.
And any of the flowers and all of that.
All sorts of stuff like that.
Well, as you said, this is mandatory and not voluntary. Let's hear what the governor says specifically about this.
There will be mandatory, or if people will do it, or there will be cease and desist orders that local water districts can issue. There can be fines. And I would hope that we don't see this in some punitive way, but that we see the challenge. California is a pioneering state. People have come here to build a life, and together we're going to build a continuously better life, but that means conservation, it means innovation, and it means collaborating on the farm and in the city and in the mountains in a way that we take into account reality.
All right, we're going to see water police. We're going to haul people into court.
Well, tough talk on the governor's part, but how do you do it? Voluntary seems to be the best way. We've already reduced water usage by up to 20% in the last year or so. Now 25% more is the request. One way I think it's going to be done is the classic American way. When you have shortage of a commodity and you want to make sure a lot of people aren't using it, you raise the prices. That's the classic way. Water cops, I don't know. People thinking on their neighbors. That's pretty unpalatable, I think. But I think prices will go up in some areas, and I think voluntarism is the way to go on this.
All right, and you mentioned agriculture. I want to get back to that in a second, but we're all live somewhere. We all use water in our residences. How do you cut back? What are you thinking about it as an individual, Jay, Megan? I mean,
I do. I have a son who went to the University of California, Santa Cruz, so it's a tree hugger world in our house. And when we're warming up for the shower, save that water and use it elsewhere. So you can do it, and you can make a difference, and it makes you feel good. You just wonder long term, is this short term Band-Aid going to be enough looking into the future?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely try to think about it, but I'm a renter, so I don't see the bill. And so, for me, I'm really going to have to sit down and strategize. What can I do? Whereas I think with homeowners, they see the bill, and it happens naturally.
Gets to what Tony's talking about you don't see the money going
60% of residential use of water is outside the house. It's not those showers, although that's important, and it's not the toilets, although those are important, but it's those lawns and those flowers and those automobiles we're washing. And that is sort of lifestyle-esque, and that's what the governor says we got to change, and quickly.
Jay?
I'm curious, you mentioned your rent and condominiums and stuff. Are homeowners associations, are they going to have a little wiggle room? Because a lot of places, you start tearing up lawns and you'll get a note from your HOA.
Good point.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And welcome to the lawsuits that will occur, doubtless. Why should I when the people down the road aren't? And everybody starts looking at everybody else like a water waster while they're being good boys and girls. So we're going to have a little feistiness on that. Now, the San Diego City Council is going to hold a session fairly soon, and the city has certain rules, strong rules about watering your lawn, washing your car, and such. Now, how will they be enforced going forward, since the governor wants not just what we've done, but he wants even more? So lots of issues. Again, I think voluntarism, I don't see a lot of fines. It's just an unwieldy kind of system, but I think prices are going up.
Now, does it change around the state? We've talked on this show before about San Diego and our deal with Imperial County and the agriculture interests over there. Other cities have different situations. Are we a little better protected, or is this going to be everybody across the board?
We have been fairly well protected because we have reservoirs, and the San Diego County Water Authority has been very aggressive cutting deals, particularly, as you note, with the farmers in the Imperial Valley. So we really have not been hit last year, this year, and maybe next year. So we've had a certain cushion. Now, certain rural areas north of us who have wells and aquifers and are dependent on sources that are very shaky, they've had a real problem. We have not yet had that problem, but it's coming.
Now, you had a story. Megan, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think some of our farms in San Diego County have had to cut back a bit, some of our avocado trees and that sort of thing.
Sure. I mean, avocado trees, you can hear the buzzsaw of them coming down because they don't have, the way water is sold, farmers, it's complex, but they don't have the same draw on the water at a certain price that you do in your condo and Jay in his palace. I mean,
Right.
it's just different. But again, the big farmers, Imperial Valley, for example, they have all the water they want. Why? Because they take it right from the Colorado River, and they have water rights. They don't just buy it; they own it, and that makes a lot of difference. Now,
is it any better, by the way, in the Colorado watershed this year, from the Wasatch and down through?
It's decreasing, but still, it's doable. They haven't
better than California's shape.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And again, statewide, 80% of California's water from the Sierra, or from the Colorado, or from other sources, 80% goes to agriculture, causing certain concern among urban and rural water users.
Right. So my wife, saying, I'm going to turn the water off while I'm shaving my legs now, and we're not going to have it run while we're rinsing the dishes and these kinds of things. It seems almost silly when you just told us 80% goes to
Well, it's the difference between lifestyle, shaved legs and washed carrots.
And there are 37 million of us.
And
legs
a livelihood, an industry, agriculture. How do you balance the two of them? How do you say, so that I can have my lawn, you must not grow a certain crop? Well, first of all, the water users in the Imperial Valley and elsewhere decades ago protected their water rights with shotguns. And now they use something even more brutal. Lawyers. They have fought to the Supreme Court to guard their water rights. They will do so again, although they aren't outside the realm of having their arms twisted, and that's happened. That's why San Diego was able to buy a bunch of water from the Imperial. Imperial got their arms twisted by the federal government. But it won't be easy, and it won't be quick.
All right, a few seconds left on this. Let me ask you one last question. That big desalination plant is coming online in Carlsbad. It's 85%. I think you had a story on
Indeed.
that. Is that going to be the big solution? Are more of those in the future going to be our solution?
It's not going to be the solution. It is part of the solution. It's a certain percentage.
Like 7%. That's
exactly.
Something, but not
big-time lawsuit going on in San Francisco, San Diego County versus Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. If San Diego prevails on that, and who knows if they will, San Diego wants to earn the right to buy more water from Metropolitan. They think San Diego has been disadvantaged vis-a-vis Los Angeles. Don't know if that's true. It will be up to the judge and the appellate court and maybe the state Supreme Court. But if they win, if San Diego wins, they'll buy themselves more water that otherwise would be in Los Angeles.
Okay. All right. Many more stories to come on that, I'm sure. All right. Well, this week marked a dramatic change in which a group of San Diego business owners saw their six-figure investments become nearly worthless overnight. I'm talking about taxi cab owners who bought precious city taxi permits, often for $120,000 or or more. There were only 993 permits to transport passengers in the city. All that changed this week. Megan, tell us start by telling us what brought about this dramatic change.
Sure. So in the past couple of years, lease drivers, so taxis have an owner, and then a lot of them are actually leased out to drivers. And so the owner collects the lease and doesn't drive on the street. And so in the past couple of years, these lease drivers have been rising up and saying our leases are so expensive that we're taking home less than minimum wage. Our working conditions are poor. And so that really sparked a conversation in City Council and at the Metropolitan Transit System. And they sort of decided that lifting this cap on taxis was going to give opportunity to those lease drivers, and Marty Emerald said she doesn't see another solution.
And we're going to get a little more about what Councilmember Emerald thinks about all of this. But to be clear, the city wasn't charging more than $100,000 for these permits. It was a black market. It was a secondary market that came up, right? Explain how that happened.
Right. So
it's just the supply and demand, right?
Yeah, above ground. If a permit's going to trade hands, the person who's receiving that permit is supposed to go down to MTS and pay a $3,000 transfer fee, and that's supposed to be the end of it. But when you constrict the supply, people get creative. There's a secondary market that developed, and on that market, the permits were going for up to as much as $150,000.
Okay, and so folks who paid some of these small businessmen really can get hurt when this thing has suddenly gone from being precious and very expensive to, as we say, not worth very much at all.
Right. You have larger taxi companies. You have USA Cab. You have Yellow Radio Service, folks that own quite a few cabs. And then you also have owner-operators, or maybe they own 3 cabs. So I spoke with one guy, and he owns 1 cab and drives it every single day, and then he has 2 other cabs and he leases those out.
All right, and that's Tesfam Dibas. I hope I'm saying that right. We have some tape. You're talking to him, and he does have a thick accent, but he's talking about concerns for his family. Let's hear that.
My main concern to raise my kids, to be a good citizen, kids, to be well educated, to help the country, not to destroy them, throw them on the curb. I never think about it. But that's what happened right now.
All right, so he's trying to tell us exactly what this means to him.
Yeah, he's saying that he invested in these cabs, and he expected them to not only provide his day-to-day wages, but, for this to be an investment like a brick-and-mortar business or a home that one day could help him pay for his child's education or pay for his retirement. And so he's saying that, essentially, this decision by the city to lift the cap is kicking his kids to the curb, is hurting his family.
It's devastated his investment here, yeah. Tony?
Well, this is San Diego, right? I mean, for decades, the way to clear the room among council members was to mention cabs, yellow cabs, and they fled. Why? Because the majority of the city council was indicted in the early 1970s for allegedly taking bribes from yellow cab that didn't turn out to be much once they went to court. But it started a political revolution that gave us Pete Wilson. So it seems to me that for decades, city has been really afraid to really grab onto this issue. And that's, I think, one reason why the black market you mentioned has arisen, because there was such fear among politicians in blessed San Diego that yellow cab, scandal, I'm out of here.
Political third rail.
And the
Exactly.
city was so hands-off for so long that when, they finally, peeked around the curtain and saw what was going on, it was this entire alternate universe where now we have the liberals on council saying the only answer is deregulation.
Now,
so
we do have, speaking of the council now, we do have Councilwoman Marty Emerald saying, let's hear what she has to say about this whole issue in her take.
That was a result of a business model that they created. The city didn't really give them direction one way or another about trading under the table on these permits.
All right, so again, they're saying, and that was there, we're trying to rectify the situation. What recourse do drivers such as the one you interviewed have?
Well, right now, several drivers have joined forces to file a lawsuit against MTS and the city. They're saying that this was an illegal taking of their property because it basically dried up that investment. And they're also saying that the city should have done a CEQA review because if they lift the cap if a bunch of people flood the market and start driving taxis, we're going to have a ton of taxis idling on the road, they say, and that's an environmental issue. And so that complaint has been filed. They're asking for an injunction, but to date, I don't believe any action has taken place based on that complaint.
So brutal for the taxi drivers and investors. How about for the riding public? Are we going to get cheaper rates?
Yeah, what's our impact going to be? A lot more cabs, cheaper rates, more competition?
Cheaper to go to the airport?
You know, it's kind of hard to tell because this has happened in other cities. It's happened in the past, and it's not, apples and apples. It's apples and oranges. The city.
Yeah, you talked about Milwaukee. They went through a similar thing. Here, we went through it several decades ago.
In terms of for customers, the city actually sets rates, and so that's not going to change overnight. It may be that it slowly creeps up as drivers say, gosh, we're not making enough money, but that's regulated. In Milwaukee, they lifted their cap, started issuing new permits in September, and they say that the number of drivers has doubled, but a lot of them are Uber drivers. They created the regulation to kind of address the Uber issue.
And we should mention Uber and Lyft. Explain what those are for folks who might not be familiar.
These are sort of a new form of a ride service, and so you use your mobile app to call them up. And in a lot of cities, they have entered the market and have been much less, in fact, not regulated at all, really. And so this was Milwaukee's way to kind of bring them under regulation.
And a lot of our drivers, am I right, are immigrants. That is to say, Somalis, Afghans, Iraqis who've come to San Diego, and this is their way of supporting their family and becoming self-sufficient. No welfare for them. Let's get into business. And now this business seems to be dying because of a change.
Well, the question, we don't know if it's going to die, though. I mean, I think that we're seeing a lot of the taxi sort of the business owners try to maintain the status quo. We're going to file this lawsuit. We're going to try to hold off this change. But eventually what researchers say needs to happen, what politicians say need to happen, and what customers say need to happen is that those traditional taxi owners are going to have to kind of adapt and become like Uber and Lyft, create their own app. And then it may still be a valid, market for a lot of the East African immigrants in San Diego.
And is the city pretty much out of it? Have they done what they're going to do and they're back to being afraid to deal with this issue?
I think that now it's, what's done is done. They're going to defend their move in the courts against this lawsuit. Yeah. And, I asked Marty Emerald if I believe San Francisco is trying to create an app that a lot of these taxi drivers would fall under and maybe compete with Uber and Lyft. And I asked Marty Emerald, are there plans to do that here in San Diego? And she said she believes some private individuals are working on that, but the city's not doing it.
All right, I'm sure we're going to do a lot of follow-up stories and see what the impact is on that. We'll have to leave that there. Well, opening day is upon us with the thwack of horsehide meeting northern ash and the aroma of hot dogs and freshly mowed grass and stands draped in bunting and new faces in fresh uniforms lining up for introductions. And for once, there's reason for hope in San Diego. Jay, the Padres might actually be pretty good. Why are we a little more optimistic than we were in the last few seasons?
Well, I don't know where you put up that banner down there that we won the offseason. But the Padres won the offseason, okay. Let's face it. They completely redone the team, and new general manager A.J. Preller said, look, the pitching's great, but at some point you got to get somebody across the plate, and he went out and got some players that got some thunder in their bat, that's for sure.
All right, so tell us about that. We've got a couple of new bona fide sluggers, Matt Kemp.
Sure do. Matt Kemp came down from the Dodgers, runner-up National League Most Valuable Player a few years back. He's the real deal. Justin Upton, the left field, an all-star, a great hitter as well, came over from the Braves. And Will Myers, American League Rookie of the Year 2 years ago. Derek Norris, another all-star at catchers. So that lineup has been changed and for the better.
I don't mean to harsh your buzz, but and mine too. I remember '84 and '98. Jed Jerko, $6 million, didn't really perform like we would have liked last year. Are they losing patience with him?
Not quite with him early in the contract, and really they're hoping these other players, these other guys in the lineup, it leaks down and it filters down, and instead of Jed Jerko having to be the cleanup hitter and carry the weight, he's going to be hitting down 6th or 7th in the lineup. So that lineup's going to get longer and better.
Better players make everybody better up and down the lineup.
Exactly. And the little ninja? Tell me about the little ninja.
Amarista, the shortstop, Alexi, he is little. He's about 5'4", so 5'5", but he played well last year down the stretch when they had to. every team has a blemish. If you want to find one, maybe the Padres are a little lacking at shortstop. But Amarista did a good job last year.
All right, before we get too deep into the reeds of baseball, let me ask you a couple of step-back questions. Why is it that that we haven't, opened the checkbook and hired some of these sluggers before? What was the focus in this part?
It was dysfunctional. That front office was three owners, Moores, Morad, and now Ron Fowler and his bunch, Pete Seiler and those guys. So, talking about filtering down, if you got trouble upstairs on the second floor, it usually comes down to the playing field. And there was just ins and outs, and there was really no mission, there was no sense, there was no dedication to do it right, because it seemed like the door was just spinning with new owners.
And they all have said, well, San Diego's a small market. We don't have the big money that the Red Sox and the Red Sox and the Yankees and the Tigers and these big spending teams have. So they could hide behind that, and they say we have to go for pitching and defense because sluggers cost money, right? But they're not saying that now. What's the change?
They're not saying that now. I think Ron Fowler and that bunch, they recognized they were starting to lose the San Diego Padres baseball fan, and that's a patient baseball fan. And not only were they bad last year, they were very boring. And when you're in the entertainment business, it's hard to cheer for a double play. So they went out and got some bats.
Yeah, didn't they set a record in June for team hitting futility?
Yeah, they hit 151 or so. The old line was, when they were no hit by Tim Lincecum of the Giants last year, it was the second time they got no hit that day because the batting practice picture no hit.
That's cruel. Not going to happen this year.
It won't happen this year.
Not going to happen. Well, go ahead.
What about our competition? San Francisco was winners,
champions,
and that thing in Los Angeles.
Yeah,
let's
the
talk
Dodgers.
about that.
I think their payroll is topped out at $1 billion, so that we can go from that now. But
you're only exaggerating a little bit.
Just
there.
a little, not much, but they have the highest payroll in the history of team sports. Approaching $300 million. Padres at $100 million and feeling good about it. But let's be clear, they have the best pitcher in baseball in Clayton Kershaw. They made some improvements as well, and they're not going anywhere. So it's a rich neighborhood the Padres play in, but that hope and that optimism, you always heard it inside the clubhouse. The difference this year, you're hearing it outside the clubhouse with objective people saying they got a chance.
Final year for Bud Black, the manager. Does he have to produce or find other?
Tell us how long he's been there now.
This will be his 9th season.
Okay. That's a long time.
That's a long time. It's a very long time, especially if you haven't been to the playoffs. He's the longest tenured manager who hasn't made the playoffs. Black, if you don't have the ponies, you can't pull the cart, and he hasn't had a lot of ponies down there. So he's a sharp baseball man, and if he did leave the Padres, he'd be hired in 15 minutes. So let's see what he can do now that he has some cards to play. But definitely the expectations.
On TV, when he does interviews, he's very candid and direct, very even-tempered.
Yeah.
Is there something else in the clubhouse? Is he screaming and yelling in the clubhouse?
He's a screamer. He's not kicking over water coolers. He's been a pro. And he realizes and appreciates the ups and downs of a sport that's really built around failure.
Built to break your heart.
Yeah, you fail 7 out of 10 times and they build you a statue, like Tony Gwynn, right? Okay, he got out 7 out of 10 times. So I think Blackie brings that experience. He brings the insight. But he's got a fire now, and you don't win 100 games as a left-hander, as he did in the major leagues, without a big fastball, without being competitive and hard-nosed. So, when that red light goes off, Bud's not afraid to air somebody out.
Let me ask another step-back question, and I want to draw Megan in on this. We've got a lot of tourists here. Conventioneers come to town. Ballpark's still only 10 years old. It's still one of the newer ballparks now. Baseball is an experience, say a cultural experience, an attraction for somebody like me who's disappointed in the team. I'll go out to 2 or 3 games just to sit there and enjoy it, and as I say, smell the hot dogs and the fresh mown grass. Is that enough to draw enough fans, some fans?
Yeah. Every spring and summer, there's a friend who calls us up and says, let's go. It's about the experience. It's, you're right downtown, and so it's nice to go down there. But our park started doing something where every time the Padres win, they shoot off fireworks. And I live right up the street from the park, and so I have no need to go. I know when they're losing. I know when they're winning.
You may have to get earphones.
And this year, speaking of Petco Park, they put in this massive scoreboard in left field, 61 feet high, and supposed to be the biggest in the National League, and high definition. And it's pretty splashy. It's good they did it this year, because last year they would have showed a bunch of zeros up there, and that's not what they're shooting for.
James Shields, formerly of Kansas City.
Yeah, that's right.
20, 25 games for us. What do
you think? That'd be a lot. They'd take 20, I know, but he he goes to the
We're talking
post.
about wins, of course.
Yeah, wins. He goes over 200 innings every year. You know, James Shields, we didn't mention him as some of the big acquisition, two-time World Series guy.
Big Game James.
Big Game James, and he's got a swagger. And, you know, that's another thing real quickly, that when you're bringing in all these new faces and new talents, new egos, you've got to get them to blend, you got them to mesh, and you got to pull them on the same side of the rope. Bud Black's real good about doing
that. What the bench coach does? That's what I want to be. I want to be a bench coach.
You want to be a bench coach, huh? So you get the praise when they win, and then when they lose, you point to the manager. You're good. I like that.
Well, a couple of seconds left. Let me ask you, the All-Star game is not coming this summer, but the following summer, right? Does that play in? Is that, you know, big attraction? Let's get a better team so we can showcase San Diego next year?
Especially they had the San Diego winter meetings here, baseball winter meeting in San Diego, and they wanted to make a splash. You know, Ron Fowler, you know, we call him the Sultan of Suds. You know, he sold a lot of beer in this town, and he doesn't like to finish second, let alone third or fourth. So he's competitive as well.
Okay, so that's coming up. They had a big event again, I should say. It's not this season, but next. And shine the spot not only on Petco and San Diego. And maybe the Padres will contend for a couple of seasons.
Instant replay again this year?
Instant replay's back. They're trying to speed up the pace of the game as well. They're trying to get the guys in and out quicker. So when you get in the beer line, you better hustle.
All right, we'll see how that plays out. Well, that does wrap up another week of stories here on the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Megan Burks of KPBS News, Tony Perry of the Los Angeles Times, and Jay Paris of Mighty 1090 Radio. A reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.